You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew McCaskill.
Hello and welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. I'm your host and your career concierge, Andrew McCaskill. And we're delighted today to be joined by Ian Moyse. Ian, thanks so much for coming on to talk to us.
Hey, it's good to be on. Good to have a chat this morning.
Yeah, fantastic. Just you've got a really wide-reaching and interesting senior background, but just for the benefit of the listeners who haven't interacted with you before, tell us a bit more about your background and what you've done.
Sure, so I'll keep it short, right, because it's more interesting to me than third parties. So, been in sales leadership now, I always say over 25 years, because I'm trying to make it sound I'm not that old. And before that was in sales, before that was a programmer. So I've changed and pivoted a number of times and continue to do so today. I work in the tech sector in the cloud computing area, which is powering a lot of the innovations that we see around AI, virtual reality, big data, all the nice terms we hear about. So it's a very interesting area to work in. But fundamentally, what I do is help businesses through sales and marketing activities drive growth. I mean, that's the simplicity of it, by engaging with people and finding prospective customers who we can help do better things for them.
Yeah, interesting that you've done both programming and the commercial side. There's not so many people that have crossed that chasm. How did that come about? And
yeah, simple terms is I fell into computing at 14, saw a neighbour move in with an old, what now is an ancient computer with hardly any capability, and I was hooked. Then through school and college and straight into, that's all I was interested in, programming. I was absolutely embedded in it. Then I got into it and saw salespeople out there earning more money with a company car and having a mobile phone, which at the time was the size of a suitcase and was a novelty because no one had mobile phones, not like the world we're in today. And I was attracted by, well, hang on a minute, I know what I'm talking about. I really understand all this, and yet they're getting all the benefits. So I left and took an inside sales role against everyone's advice at the time, leaving a programming role at IBM for an unknown company, inside sales. I've never done sales before, blah, blah, blah. And through sheer graft at the beginning, just working so hard because I didn't know how to sell anything. I didn't have any training. It was on the job, just get going. So through sheer hard work and osmosis of learning from the people around me, which we may come on to some of the things I think are important now, I got promoted to field sales and went through that and continued to learn as I do today. So yeah, it wasn't a career choice that I'd planned. It was more opportunistic that I wanted to be successful and I wanted to aspire to have, if you look at it, I wanted to have a mobile phone and a car paid for. Simple as that.
No, I think that's very honest. It makes perfect sense. I don't know, when I was doing a bit of research before you came in, you've operated in a NED capacity. You're obviously a chief revenue officer at the moment. You've worked in a range of different leadership teams. How have you tended to source those opportunities, or how have those opportunities tended to come to you in your career? Sure.
So interesting. So some I've created myself by outreach, and across my career, the first role where I held a sort of leadership, true business leadership, as opposed to just managing people, I saw a product that I thought, wow, I really like this, and they didn't have a UK office. And with my naivety at the time as a salesperson, I reached out to the CEO in Denmark, a Danish firm, and said, you're not selling that over here. I really love what you've got. If you thought about opening an office? And to my shock, they reached out and went, actually, that's interesting. We'll fly you over. And they flew me over there, had a day with me, had me write a business plan and a P&L that day. I'd never done that before. It was like, okay. They gave me a PC with a spreadsheet and said, tell us what you're going to need and how you do it. So I remember sitting in their office just outside Copenhagen, working it out, coming up with what I thought, well, I don't know if this is right or wrong, and they loved it. We went with it. It was very successful. And I sort of realized then that sometimes you're constrained by your own limitations. Because if someone had said, you're going to take this on, build a plan, cost P&L and all that stuff, I'd have thought, well, I don't know how to do that, because I hadn't done it before. Not that I didn't have the ability, but because I hadn't done it before, well, surely can I do that type of thing? And I was thrown into it by them right on the spot. So that one I created myself. Some of them have come to me now. What I find now more often than not, because of the personal brand that I've created, and that's by accident, we may talk about that, but I get a lot of inquiries, not just for job roles, but for, can you guest on this podcast like we're talking today? Could you contribute to this article? Could you give us a comment for this? We're producing this publication article. Could you give us a thought leadership comment that you'll be part of that? Which obviously helps the organization I work with as well, because you get your brand in there as that thought leadership piece. And I've had 2 or 3 reach out this week. I've had 2 Twitter, some on LinkedIn. Could you feature in this? Could you appear on this panel? Could you guest on this? We're doing a new webinar series. We'd like to have you guest on this. So I think by putting stuff out there, initially I put effort out of contributing and giving. Stuff comes back to you. I always think you give back to the sector industry. If you volunteer for things, volunteer to speak at events, volunteer to give back, you also create opportunity for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. I actively encourage anybody who's building a personal brand to take the approach of paying into the ecosystem, because the more you do that, the more it pays you back anyway, right? That's absolutely my experience. I pre-warned you before we started talking that I'm a quote fan. So I'm keen to understand if there's any quotes that have really resonated with you during your career, or that you've taken with you through all the different roles that you've had.
Yeah, I didn't give this any thought at all in terms of trying to plan or come up with some clever quote. Immediate into my mind comes, don't boil the ocean. And an old boss said this to me many years ago, because I would try and get everything done. I have to-do lists, right? I've got a to-do list here. I always have lists. Every day I have lists I want to work through, and crossing them off and prioritizing. And that's really driven by that comment that he gave me, was don't try and do everything, and don't try and do everything to perfection. Sometimes good enough is enough, because you can be too perfectionist on, here's 50 things to do, and you only get 3 of them done because you're so ingrained in getting everything done, and you don't prioritize which ones are important. He said you can't do everything. So he used to go to the extreme. I won't name him for the protection, but I keep in touch with him now. This is 20 years on, and he was head of global for a major corporation. And the worst example he gave, or the most extreme, was his inbox. He was very accessible, and everyone would copy him in on everything. So what he would do is, here's my example, once a month he'd delete his inbox. What? He says, well, if it's important, they're going to come back to me. Stuff, what I do is say everything over a month old, it's gone, because right now it's not relevant. And if it was important, they're going to bring it back to me, because I can't deal with everything. Otherwise, nothing gets done. And that's always stuck with me when there's a lot going on and someone's running around, nothing's getting achieved, is what are the important things that must happen, and by when, and what's the outcome? Well, what happens if you don't do them? What's the consequence if you didn't do that thing? Because often people get hung up on doing things, and often they sway towards the things that they enjoy doing, as opposed to the ones that will drive the most benefit.
Indeed, the old urgent times important matrix that we all know and love. Building on that theme then, so a lot of our listeners, executives like yourself, but they're finding themselves currently in transition in a relatively tricky job market. I think we could all agree over the last 12 months, it's been trickier than usual. So what kind of advice would you have for them in terms of not boiling the ocean, and how they take themselves to market, and the types of things they should be thinking about?
Sure. So I think, and I've gone through what they've experienced, right, back end of last year. So I've been through this to come into this role. And a couple of things. I always treat getting a job as a job. And to that effect, what do I mean by that? So some people said at the time, my wife said to me, we'll take some time, relax a little bit. Well, I can't do that. I need to be doing stuff. So I was every day here at the PC with an objective of, I'm going to find so many roles. I'm going to make sure I don't miss any opportunity out there. So my sales head went into action. So I looked for every place I needed to register, for every alert that would come in. And the bugbear of that is you do get alerts where, and any guidance to anyone creating jobs out there, where the job title doesn't quite meet the spec of the point, right? One of my bugbears is sales director, where actually it's a sales role and everyone employed in that organization is a sales director. Well, I put a filter on sales director as one of the terms, right? So I would get all of those jobs which are actually sales roles and not appropriate to what I was looking for, and have to filter them out. But so be it. And I was proactively also going out. I wasn't waiting for jobs to come in or people to find me. I wasn't just going to recruiters. I went to recruiters and said, look, this is what I'm looking for. And I also appreciate that you may not have anything on your books now. And I'm not expecting the floodgates to open, but I want you to know that I'm available. So should something come across your desk that is appropriate, you know I'm here and there's a match. So I made sure people knew I was available, but I also reached out to old contacts. People change, people move on. So I used my own network. So it's important to use your LinkedIn's a beautiful thing in that way. Look at your network, look at where people have moved. I also reached out to organizations and I identified organizations that I thought I could bring value to based on my experience and what I've done. I looked at organizations that weren't in the UK, for example, having done startups, having brought value, and I know the market, who were in sectors where I could bring value. And I reached out to the CEOs. And several times, interestingly, I had a list at the end of 13 shortlisted, sort of where I'm in the mix and progressed at different stages of the process. And at least half of those, I remember looking at it, it was either 6 or 7, were self-created by me. And several of them had no role at the point I contacted them. And the discussion was actually, as you've reached out, it's an interesting discussion. They came back with, we've had a discussion behind the scenes, and yes, because of you being available, we'd like to discuss this. So I created the agenda. Another one I remember reaching back saying, well, we haven't advertised the role at the moment, but yeah, let's have it. So I was straight pushed to the top of the candidate list before they'd gone out to their recruitment partners, before they'd advertised the role. The CEO had told their global VP of sales to have a conversation with me, and I was on calls.
Yeah,
Much better place to be. So it's about owning it. I think that's the key thing. Own it, not expect everything to sort itself out for you. Do something about it. And every day I was treating it as a work day. That was my job.
Yeah, we talk about being the CEO of your job search. I think that aligns really, really well. And I love a couple of the points in the stats, right? But it's estimated that there's 80 to 85% of the senior job market never gets advertised. So that kind of proactive outreach and that awareness marketing that you were doing, and you were kind of uncovering things early, I think that's exactly what people should be doing.
Yeah.
How did you end up securing your current role then?
So interestingly, and I did know, I think I've listened to your other sessions, and there's a question about your funny recruitment story, and I'm going to tell you, because you've asked now, it slots into here, I guess, so I was attracted to this because I've helped many smaller businesses with great technology and all the great foundations to accelerate growth. So it fitted perfectly into what I've done before. And I was excited about what we have, because I'm a sales leader. My peer group is sales leaders. And what we have at One Up Sales is a product that helps sales leaders drive the motivation, behavior, and productivity of their sales and recruitment teams. Well, I understand that because I'm the customer, I'm the prospective customer. So my brain immediately understood the proposition and thought, well, in talking about this, if I was doing that, I would be talking to people like me about stuff that I'm passionate about. I'm talking to a peer group. What an easy conversation. So I'm really attracted to it amongst those others that I had. But I was excluded from the process because they already had I spotted it late, a recruiter who knows me put me forward for the role, and thought I was ideal, but then came back to me. And I remember a conversation I had with her. She said, yeah, Ian, I'm really sorry, but they've got too many candidates in that list. Now, I was really excited about it. You read about something, you get, oh, this sounds great. And I remember pausing and saying, actually, no, I'm not taking that and just giving up. No, let's go back with why you should include me in that list. because I've got all the ammunition that says I'm a really strong candidate for you. So we fought back. We didn't just take it as a no. I didn't just listen to the recruiter. I said, no, here's what you're going to do. And I put it together. I didn't say to them, I know me better than anyone. And we fought our way back into the process. And it was 25 people at that point. And then it narrowed down to the final two. And believe me, did I use that as part of the process of, did I not fight my way back in? Did I not show tenacity? Is that not what you want in someone that you're going to employ? Someone who doesn't give up at the first hurdle and walk away. Have I not demonstrated that to you live?
That's awesome.
And here I am today, right? So yeah, I think the learning exercise and the funny bit for me was, how many people would just give up because they got rejected, as opposed to fight back. How many people ever fight back? And interestingly, now I learned something from that. In the people I'm interviewing, I'm watching to see how many fight back when I reject in some way, or say, well, I don't think you're the best fit. We've got enough candidate or whatever. How many fight back? And they don't. People don't argue and say, well, actually, no. And I give feedback to people of why, right? So that makes it even worse. I take the effort to say, the reason I don't think you fit is this. And the fact that people tend to come back to go, thank you for the feedback. We don't normally get feedback. That's really appreciated. I can learn from that. Great. So great engagement, but no one fights back to say, no, I disagree with that. And I think that's not a good enough reason, particularly in sales roles.
And is that because they are probably not great at sales and taking the challenger position, or is that because they don't apply their business skills to their own benefit?
I think, and it's a good question. I think, Andrew, our position this as what I've witnessed. And now I interview salespeople in the majority, right? Marketing people as well, but salespeople should be the best at interviewing because it's what you do, right? The nature of the job you do has trained you to sell something to someone you haven't met before, to listen, to ask questions, to engage, to build rapport. All the skill set you have for your actual job fit perfectly for an interview. The difference being the product you're selling is you, and you know that product better than anyone else. What I witness, however, and if I witness this in salespeople, I've got to make the assumption it propagates into other individuals and roles, is salespeople in the majority in interviews seem to go out of sales mode into interview mode and behave differently and become subservient to the interviewer, because a couple of things I think go on in their head. One is that you've got the power because you've got the job they want and you're the product. And the second one is, I think they go into it's personal. This is about me. It's not about, I can't disseminate and say, well, I'm selling you this product. And if you don't buy it, it's not that you didn't like me or whatever. If you don't get the job, it's absolutely personal that they didn't think you were capable or the right person or would fit the culture or whatever it is. It is personal, a personal decision. And they go into interview mode and they don't. And a number of times at the end of interview, I've asked a salesperson who's been very experienced, longevity in career, so you didn't have a pad? Like, oh, no. Well, I do when I see a customer. You didn't have a pad with notes on it. I recognize that the minute they sit down in the real world at an interview. I don't tell them, oh, we haven't got a pad and trigger them to defend it. I just wait to see what happens. And they don't have notes. And I like someone to sit there. I said, I've had one say I had a photographic memory. I said, I don't care, because unless I'd ask this question and whether I believe you or not, have a pad. I don't know what's on it. It could be a shopping list, but it's a perceived thing that you've prepared. And I want them to go, right, yeah, I've got questions. You've answered that one. I want them to behave in a way that shows me they care about this engagement and it's important to them, and they've done preparation and they've got the facts.
I think it's really interesting your point around, because my feeling is the same as yours, in that I know people who I know for a fact are very, very good commercial leaders who've taken businesses into new territories, rolled out new product offerings, and simply wouldn't have been able to achieve what they have achieved if they weren't good commercially and weren't good client facing. Yep. So I think your hypothesis that they switch out of sales mode into interview mode is absolutely right. And I think it's because of that emotional attachment to the outcome. Whereas in sales, you can train yourself to not have such an emotional attachment to the outcome. Even though there's commission and stuff involved, you sell best when you don't have that emotional attachment to the outcome. And I think that's the bit. And we see this in the London buses effect, whereby you get a senior leader who's been on the market for 12 months, who suddenly gets 3 offers. And it's like, well, there you go. That's because once you got the first offer, you completely changed your approach in the next 2 interviews. And then you've got this flood of opportunity now. It's the law of attraction, isn't it? So I thought that was fascinating insight. Thank you for that.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew here. Just wanted to very briefly interrupt this podcast episode to tell you a little bit more about our Career Jump Club. So our Career Jump Club was created to help job seekers understand what they want and how to get it, right? So becoming a club member is a great move if you're looking to get the clarity and confidence in order to secure your next role. With the membership, you get a number of different things. So first thing you get is access to our online platform, which has over 30 videos, 40, 50 different templates, workbooks, and it takes you through everything from sort of understanding what you want to how to position your CV and LinkedIn, how to interview, how to close offers and negotiate better salaries, a full end-to-end job search course effectively for senior leaders. So you get that, you get a fortnightly group coaching call, which is with me and with the other members, where we bounce around best practice, share slide decks, share techniques, and share the latest data on what's working for people. And you get to, most importantly, become part of our closed LinkedIn group and our closed community. And in there is where the magic often happens, because you get people referring each other into opportunity, supporting each other, and just sharing. And that's what it's all about. So if you're financially able and you'd like to invest in your job search, head on over to www.execcareerjump.com, all one word, /club, and you'll find the landing page and come and give it a go. We'll see you in there. Anyway, back to the pod.
I just wanted to dial back a little bit because you touched on something which we haven't covered on the podcast before, but I think it's, again, a really interesting topic, which is this idea of job titles. So particularly in the tech ecosystem within which you operate, everybody's in the C-suite or a VP early, and they go out advertising for VP of sales, for example, or sales director, when in essence, it's an AE or an SDR type job, frankly, in terms of what they actually need. Now, the justification they give for that is that they want to give the individual the job title to carry enough gravitas in the market to close sales.
Yeah.
Any weight in that argument at all? Or
so I've heard that. I wrote a blog of this probably a couple of years ago now. I think it was something like, when is a sales director not a sales director? Because I'd gone through this process of interviewing, and it happened before. Now 4 or 5 years on, go through the same again. Here we are again, where you get all these pop up, and you look at it, and then you look at the role, you look at the description, and go, this is a sole contributor role, which is nothing wrong with that. But it's, why have you called it VP, as you say, VP of sales or sales director? Because it's triggered into a different bank. Now, if you look up, when I wrote that short blog, I thought, was this me? So I looked up definition, what is the sales director definition, the dictionary definition, what appears there? And when you look at it, it sets direction, leads people, owns the strategy, boom, boom, boom. There is a clear definition, right? And then there's a salesperson role, whether you call it AE or whatever. And this argument of, but it makes it better in front of the customer, really? Is that not misleading the customer from the start and propagating a negative perception of sales as misleading? Because I've said I'm a sales director. Well, sales director dictionary definition says this, and what you've just said, it makes them look more important to the customer, or gravitas. But it's not true. Right? And I sit on a number of things with the Association of Professional Sales, a number of different bodies talking about getting sales as a profession. Sales is something you should be proud of, and something that should have ethics, authenticity, transparency, honesty, all the right metrics. Sales has a tainted name out there, right? Some people say, well, I don't want to be called a salesperson. Well, wonder why that is. And now yet I would argue we're potentially propagating that, because what you're doing is representing to a customer, this people has by title, an authority in your business that they do not have. If you've got 20 sales directors who then has got whatever the title is above them, what you're alluding to the customer is this individual engaging with you is actually that more senior person in the business, and they're not. So why would you do that? Oh, it gets us through the door more. Now, I don't mind whether an account manager calls themselves an account executive, a business development executive, a such and such consultant, whatever that, but really, tell them you're a salesperson. The customer's going to figure it out. There's nothing wrong. Yes, I've got this chief revenue officer title, but I say, but on calls with prospects, I will openly say to them, I'm really keen. My job is to figure out if we're the right solution for you. If we are, how we can do business together. What's it going to take to get you over the line for us to get this? So all those things. Be honest about it.
Transparency.
I want,
Transparency.
yeah. People appreciate it, and they know anyway, right? They're not blind to it. So why not just tell them? And I've said to people, prospective customers, look, there's a good fit here. So, my role right now is to see how we get you into this, how we get you into the driving seat of this and buying it. If you're in my shoes, what's it going to take to do that? What do we need to do? What are we missing? Have an open. It's two humans talking together. And I think the important point about that, which I talked about on others, and we won't turn into a big subject though, is make it a conversation, not a communication. Too often, I see the reason this stuff goes on is there's too much email going on and too much electronic communication. It's communication, that isn't a conversation. And that stuff doesn't work in a communication because you haven't got rapport in an email. You haven't got tonality. I can't be a little bit cheeky in the way I phrase something to you and go, Andrew, it looks like I'm watching your reaction that you like what we've got, right? And you're kindly saying positive things about, oh, we'd love to have this. So I'm making some assumption from the reaction you're giving is this is something you'd like to use in your business and you can see some use for. How do we do that? Because my job is to help you use our product, right? Is to see if you want to place an order with us at some point, and yours is to make sure it's the right thing for your business. How do we help each other? Talk like that. And you can't do that on email. You can't. It's got to be a conversation, whether it's a video or a phone call. It's got to be two humans actually truly engaging.
And you can do that at interview.
Absolutely. And people don't know, right? It's the number of interviews I get where, what's a good interview for me and a bad one as the recruitment person, as the recruiter, I guess, hiring manager. It's one where it isn't me asking a question, handing the ball to you, and you answering that question, and then handing the ball back to me and going, go on, what you got next? It just flows naturally. And I ask something and you might actually take it there and throw a question back at me. But that's interesting. And before I answer that, but how does such and such, or why? Making it an engagement, not a lot of interviews, in my view, you're absolutely right, could be a communication. They could be an email. Here's the question. Here's my answer. Could be a live chat going on.
Exactly. And that two-way process. Again, if you're going for some kind of senior commercial role and you're not asking questions and you're not finishing your answers with questions, then you're not showing the behaviors that you should be. Very good. Let's talk LinkedIn next. Noticed, obviously, you've built a really strong following on there and you're doing lots of talks and podcast appearances at the moment with regards to personal branding. What's your take in terms of building a strong personal brand, particularly thinking about the context of somebody that's in transition and the opportunity that LinkedIn represents?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I fell into this through doing social selling the proper way, and we won't talk about that because I could spend 20 minutes on why people get that wrong, and realizing that, well, if anyone's ever going to land and look at my social profile, that's a first impression. And what I've said to people is, number one, think today, often the first impression is now digital, right? Particularly in the world since COVID, it's accelerated. Would you go to a interview business meeting not dressed appropriately? And that doesn't mean suited and booted, because it might be you're a designer and it's appropriate to whatever it is, but you'd think about what you're going to wear, right? You think about getting there on time, the first impression. And we've all been told, the first 30 seconds, the first 3 minutes, all these metrics and psychological things, the firm handshake and etc. And yet on digital, it seems to be people don't care. They haven't polished their shoes, right? They haven't updated their profile, and the excuses that they haven't got, many still don't even have the number I see candidates where, even worse for salespeople, they don't even have a profile picture, or the profile picture is something jokey or not appropriate. Now, I always say the profile picture needs to be appropriate to what you're doing. If you are a party clown, right, for kids' parties, there is no problem having a party clown picture because that's what you do, and it would be expected and understood. But don't have a picture of you with a couple of mates at a wedding with a beer holding. Don't have you a picture in the distance where it's a miniature character on the beach, but you like that picture. That's not what it's there for. It's what's the first impression that is giving and firstly is graphical and visual. Secondly is then the content, and make it engaging. You are a human being, and I'm constantly looking at mine and improving it. I'm constantly looking at what other people do and plagiarizing the good I see. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm constantly honing and tuning my profiles no matter what I see on others. So if you look at mine, it will start off with something around the lines of, I first got into computing when I was age 14, a little bit of something about human, making it human, personal. And I nurture my profile, as you say. If I appear in a podcast, I'll post it on there, I'll show content, I'll make it engaging and interesting. But if you come there, you can find an awful lot out about me, not just facts about the jobs, about me as an individual. And it gives you an impression of how much I care about that personal brand. And personal brand is incredibly important. The podcast, I was on a panel yesterday, again and again and again, from around the world, so it's not culturally specific. Experts constantly talk personal brand in all different industries, all different set, and how important and how more important it is. This is not an egotistical, you're a D-list celebrity on some social program, the circle or whatever it be. This is about it. People will find you online right now in an electronic world. At the point you're about to call someone, how easy is it? Right now, Andrew, I could be talking to you and you wouldn't even know if I was sort of looking at my other screen and pulling up your LinkedIn profile and having a look. I could even be doing it while I'm talking to you, right? In the prior COVID world, people would look at it before they came to the meeting and might have forgotten. But now it's so habitual that people will check, particularly in a recruitment issue. So when I look at a candidate, the first thing I do is pull up the LinkedIn profile and have a quick glance, because it's more visually, for me, it's easier to view than the CV. And also often I spot discrepancies between them, which prompts me to ask questions in interview of, well, what happened there then? Because your CV has been your chosen, this is this formulaic control I'm going to give of what they see of me. But you've forgotten about your LinkedIn profile. And I'll check people out also on Twitter and other profiles of, if anywhere I can find you publicly, the information is freely available and visual to me, it's fair game that I take a look.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's naive.
I can see it, it's fair game.
It's naive to think that people aren't doing that. It's the norm. And even in the pre-COVID world, when I was in headhunting, the amount of times we would put all this time and effort into writing up all these notes and presenting these CV packs into the CEO for their next CRO hire. And the first thing that he or she would do would bring up, what's the name? And then quickly have a look on LinkedIn. And I think because it's in the public domain as well, so that it hasn't been curated for the role, you take a little bit more trust in it to some extent.
Yeah, and if you're lax on it, here's the thing, right, is if you're lax on it, it's going to come back and bite you. So you need to care about it. It also demonstrates to people how much you're aware of the world that we live in and how relevant you have maintained yourself. I've had people who've been around for years go, yeah, I don't need that anymore because look at my profile and my bio, etc. Okay, how do you know that? Well, it's never done me any harm. How do you know that? Have people really reached out to you and said, yeah, we've excluded you from the process. You didn't get shortlisted because we looked at what we could see on social and we just weren't impressed. Did they tell you that? Just because you haven't heard it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And the other thing I would context is, the reason I also look is to see who we're connected with and who know, because I've sat in front of a candidate before and looked good on paper, and they said, so what would such and such person say about you? And I've watched their face drop. And I've said, because I know them, they've worked for me 3 times and I can see you're connected to them and you've been connected. What would they say about you? Do you know them well? And they were like, now they should have expected that. They could see what I could see, who's shared connections. I go into something leveraging it. This role, our CEO would say to you, I checked him at his profile out, and he said at the time, boy, you're meticulous, because I could see you on Instagram. I checked everything out because I wanted to understand the individual I was going to engage with during the process as best I could, and who are they connected with that I know, and I then pushed forward. So it's great we're talking, and I'm really keen on the role. So one of the things that will be important to you will be X, Y, Z, I guess. And it's easy for me to say I'm fantastic at that, but I know I can see you know Alison X. How well do you know Alison? Oh, pretty well. Okay, so Alison would be a better reference for me on this. I'm offering up reference right now, because that's someone that you know and I know. And straight away, it shows that I've done my research, I'm smart about it, and I'm controlling that situation in the way you want a CRO to lead the way, right? I'm not sat waiting for you to ask me a question and say, and who would I use as a reference?
Absolutely right. And it works both ways. So we also talk to hiring leaders about the fact that people like you are making the same assessments of them. So everybody, no matter where you're sat in terms of which side of the table, no matter where you are in the hiring equation, you've got to make sure that you're on top of this stuff.
Absolutely. And I've been proud enough, and I wouldn't have raised unless but as you've kindly said, that is, I've had candidates in the past say to the business, not just to me, and one of the things attracting us is we really want to work for Ian because we've seen his profile and what he's done, and I think I could learn some things. It's very flattering for me to hear that. And it's also a nice endorsement into the business if they're telling other people in your business the reason that they're interested in working for you is because of you. Whoa, how did that come about? So absolutely, I totally agree with that. And anyone of their sorts cares about their lead, who they're going to work for, right? Because that's a key. I see these things on LinkedIn, these quote cards all the time of people don't leave a business, they leave their manager.
It's true.
I've had people work for me 2, 3, and 4 times in different companies, and I'm quite proud of that. And I cite that to candidates. So I must do something right. I can't be that bad if people come back, right? So, but you can see that it's visible, and I totally agree. It works both ways, and it's a value. If you're a senior in your business, often it's the senior people that I see that often don't have a profile or don't care about it.
No,
and I think
absolutely.
It's a big mistake.
It is a big mistake, not least because individual profiles have 10 times the reach of company profiles anyway in terms of content distribution. So it's a huge missed opportunity for client acquisition, talent acquisition, all of the above. And they're all looking at it. They're all looking at it. Prospects are looking at it. New hires are looking at it. Future talent pipelines, everybody's looking at it, as you rightly say. Well, there's some tremendous insights in there. You've been really generous with your thoughts today. So thank you for coming on to do that. What's the best way for somebody to follow you, get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. So business-wise, oneupsales.co.uk. Please come and take a look. We specialize in helping recruiters be more productive and successful. For me personally, you can find me at ianmoyse.co.uk and ianmoyse.cloud. There's another personal branding tip in itself, right? Costs virtually nothing to have your own URL. Those 2 links will take you to my LinkedIn and my Twitter profile. So rather than say, go on LinkedIn, search for name. And luckily, my name's easy to find because it's not common. But if your name was Paul Smith, you're really going to say, go on LinkedIn, look for Paul Smith, look for this, then and make it easy for the viewer to find me. So ianmoyse.co.uk, ianmoyse.cloud. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time. Make sure you follow up with Ian if you're listening. We get a lot of the recruitment and headhunter ecosystem listening as well. So it sounds like you would be somebody that could really help them navigate all this madness and grow their revenue. So thank you again. We'll catch up soon. Cheers.
Sure. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew McCaskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.